emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for AC Press and the Spanish Evangelical Alliance. Closing down churches or just the buildings? Concern over new legislation being considered in Catalonia governing the opening and use of places of worship continues to grow. Proposed legislation is confusing because it does not distinguish between places of worship which already exist and new ones. This means that, for instance, an anti-clerical mayor or one with any kind of political agenda hostile to religious and perhaps particularly Christian activity, could close churches that have been open for hundreds of years. Another regulation contained in the new law is that when licenses are granted, preference will be given to multi-faith centres. Well, that's not only absurd, but clearly discriminatory against any place of worship which represents one religious community. The law also talks about the temporary occupation of a public street, which, if included in legislation on places of worship, in effect would restrict the freedom of speech and religious practice of a church or other religious group. A council could easily use such legislation to ban, for instance, outdoor evangelism, concerts with Christian content, or indeed any event of a religious nature. Another consideration is whether or not the authorities may determine what is and what is not a meeting place with religious aims. According to existing legislation, such a decision can only be made by the religious group themselves and not by a local council. The council clearly can ensure that the law is kept in terms of public order and not causing a disturbance and so on. But not even the regional assembly, the local parliament, can decide when a building becomes or ceases to be a place of worship. That has important fiscal consequences, as recognized religious communities are exempt from certain taxes. Well, against this backdrop, the Christian pressure group E-Christians is also challenging the authorities on two other fronts. It claims that recent education regulations introduced in Catalonia break the Spanish constitution as well as European human rights law, on the ground that the state must not indoctrinate, and has also lodged a complaint about the 400,000 leaflets on child sex that the authorities want to hand out in schools, hospitals, and other public buildings. Underage sex, I suppose we should call that. Lérida, Girona, Salt, and Badalona are four places in the region where evangelicals have already suffered some kind of opposition from the local authorities. Last month, Salt Council closed an evangelical church building due to the fact that it did not possess the now notorious license to operate. Jaume Torrado, the church's pastor, comments, "It seems that certain politicians, either ignorant of or deliberately dismissive of the real legal arguments, have set out on a witch hunt in classic Francoist style." Torrado speaks of what he calls democratic repression to describe the recent wave of evangelical church closures across Spain, not just in the Catalan region. But at the end of the day, the authorities can close church buildings, but they cannot close the church, nor prevail against it. And of course, church building closures are nothing new. Yes, it is a return to Franco's time in that sense, and yes, that is a concern in a society which claims to be democratic and increasingly so. But ultimately, the witness of the church will be seen in how it responds to these closures. Thank you for listening to Letter from England, broadcasting at emission.net. Goodbye for now.
emisión.net